lawnmower. But again, I digress. The data confirm Fortune's impressions. Between the 1920s and the 1950s, real incomes for the richest Americans fell sharply. Gee, I wonder why. Perhaps we taxed the snot out of them. Not just compared with the middle class, but in absolute terms. According to estimates by the economists Thomas Piketty and Emmanuel Saez, in 1955, the real incomes of the top 0.1% of Americans were less than half what they had been in the late 1920s, and their share of total income was down by 3/4. Today, of course, the mansions, armies of servants, and yachts are back, bigger than ever. And can you hear in Mr. Krugman's voice how much he feels this is terrible? Such prosperity, such success. I bet they want to try and protect their profits too. Any hint of policies that might crimp plutocrat style is met with cries of quote-unquote socialism. Indeed, the whole Romney campaign was based on the premise that President Obama's threat to modestly raise taxes on top incomes, plus his temerity in suggesting that some bankers had behaved badly, were crippling the economy. Surely, then, the far less plutocrat-friendly environment of the 1950s must have been an economic disaster, right? Well, just to be clear, the Romney campaign was not based on the premise that of simply President Obama's threats to modestly raise taxes on top incomes, because he's not talking about modestly doing anything, but he's also talking about spending like a drunken sailor. I'm sorry, continuing to spend like a drunken sailor, and suggesting that some bankers behave badly. No one was suggesting that all banking regulation should be thrown out, but that rather the banking regulations that we have, A, neither accomplish what it is they think they're going to, and B, significantly drive up the cost of financial services, and C, are a threat to community banks. But never let a few facts get in the way of a good liberal story. Actually, some people thought so at the time. Paul Ryan and many other modern conservatives are devotees of Ayn Rand. Well, the collapsing, moocher-infested nation she portrayed in Atlas Shrugged, published in 1957, was basically Dwight Eisenhower's America. I don't know, well, we'll come back. Strange to say, however, the oppressed executives Fortune portrayed in 1955 didn't go galt and deprive the nation of their talents. Instead, on the contrary, if Fortune is to be believed, they were working harder than ever, and the high-tax, strong union decades after World War II were in fact marked by spectacular, widely shared economic growth. Nothing before or since has matched the doubling of median family incomes between 1947 and 1973. Which brings us all back to the nostalgia thing. And yes, Mr. Krugman, let's come back from whatever nostalgia thing it is you think you've analyzed here. There are, let's face it, some people in our political life who pine for the days when minorities and women knew their place, gays stayed firmly in the closet, and congressmen asked, "Are you now, or have you ever been?" The rest of us, however, are very glad those days are gone. We are, morally, a much better nation than we were. And with this, I take exception, to say the least, with Mr. Krugman. We are so enlightened as a country that we have killed over 50 million unborn children, half of whom are women. Talk about a war against women. Where marriages continue to deteriorate, where more people than ever are living off of food stamps, where over 23 million people cannot find jobs. But oh yes, morally, we are a much better nation than we were. Wrong. Oh, and the food has improved a lot too. One would argue with that statement as well. Along the way, however, we've forgotten something important, namely that economic justice and economic growth aren't incompatible. America in the 1950s made the rich pay their fair share, which, according to Mr. Krugman, appears to be 70%. It gave workers the power to bargain for decent wages and benefits. Yet, contrary to right-wing propaganda then and now, it prospered. And we can do that again. Which reminds me of something that Ronald Reagan once said. The problem with our liberal friends is not that they're wrong, it's that so much that they know just isn't so. We'll talk a bit more about that coming up when we come back at the top of the hour. But keep those numbers in mind, folks. 91% and 70%. Because that appears to be what fair share looks like. So we've got that to look forward to. You're listening to the Palmetto Conservative Show here on the CB Media Network. I'm your host, Jim Lee. Stick with us as we make our transition here into Hour 2. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
Missionaries in a foreign field. Coming to you from sunny South Carolina, it's the Palmetto Conservative Show with your host, Jim Lee. From the upstate to the low country, from the coast to Columbia, we'll cover what's right and uncover what's wrong in the Palmetto State. If we see it, we say it. We call it like it is in South Carolina. And now, it's the Palmetto Conservative Show. Let's jam.
Welcome into Hour 2 of the Palmetto Conservative Show here on the Conservative Broadcast Media Network. No, your clock is not wrong. We just went exceptionally long in that first hour, so if you're thinking it's the top of the hour, but it's 10 after, you're right, it is 10 after. I'm your host, Jim Lee, part political junkie, part technology geek, part commentator, and, well, let's face it, I'm just a sarcastic, snarky agitator for the application of common sense and the pursuit of critical thinking in the marketplace of ideas, particularly as it relates to the Palmetto State. I don't profess to have all the answers, folks, but boy, I just have an awful lot of relevant questions. Love being here, taking on the cacistocracy. Hope you'll join me in some of that rhetorical banter tonight as I talk about things from my warped view of the world. We left you in the first hour talking about apparently the left has established, at least according to Mr. Paul Krugman, what the fair share should be. And we've determined that 91% should be the top marginal income tax rate, and that the effective federal tax rate should be about 70%, that constitutes the fair share. And in response to Mr. Krugman, Mr. Gary DeMar had some things to say, and I couldn't agree with him more. Mr. DeMar writes, Paul Krugman, a regular commentator for the New York Times, wants to return to the good old days of high tax rates. He's trying to make the case that high tax rates on the nation's wealthiest income earners was good for the economy in the 1950s. Quote, in the 1950s, incomes in the top bracket faced a marginal tax rate of 91%, that's right, 91%, while taxes on corporate profits were twice as large relative to national income as in recent years. The best estimates suggest that circa 1960, the top 0.1% of Americans paid an effective federal tax rate of more than 70%, twice what they pay today. Mr. DeMar writes, it's too bad that conservatives don't know how to argue their case for lower taxes. And this, I think, is key for anyone who is dealing with those who simply say that the rich don't pay their fair share, we need to sock it to them. Krugman also misses the real reason why all people should be opposed to high or even medium taxes on anybody. Ask yourself this. This is my commentary here, not Mr. DeMar's, but I thought we had a constitution, and I thought there was something about equal protection under the law. But anyway, Mr. DeMar writes, by what authority do elected representatives have the right to tax some people at a higher rate than other people? Is it because a majority of people want to, 1, punish high-income earners because of envy, or 2, is it because they want some of what prosperous people earn by way of wealth transfer? Either way, the rationale and practice are immoral, which does kind of fly in the face of Mr. Krugman's argument that we are so much more moral today than we were back in the 50s. It's irrelevant what the tax rate was in the 1950s as compared to today. The more pressing question is the taxing power of the state. A few hundred people and a cadre of judges determine how much money you and I get to keep.